The Looming Misstep. The next day, I attended my first counseling session at the BYU Counseling Center. My counselor was a middle-aged Hawaiian man who seemed to find me boring as a client. I told him I struggled with being gay, but he gave no real input, so the conversation died several times during the hour. At the end of the meeting, he suggested I go to group counseling instead of continuing with individual sessions. I left feeling disappointed. At least, my promised date with Easton was coming. I viewed this date as my last chance at happiness. My future with Easton all rode on that single night. I spent my waking hours thinking about Easton. I loved him. It was wonderful. It was also rather terrible. The tenuous state of our relationship had total dominion over my emotions. Easton, what time did you want to go? Me, how about I pick you up around 5? Easton, sounds good. Me, okay, just send men a text when you're ready. Easton, okay, I will send men a text. Starry eye emoji. Me, haha, oh gosh, gotta love autocorrect. Easton, you must like men a lot, huh? Winky face emoji. Me, I don't know, I guess so. That doesn't mean I'm gay, does it? Easton, why yes, I think so. With that playful backdrop, I drove to pick Easton up for what I hoped wouldn't be our last date. I took him to a local Indian restaurant across the street from the new Provo City Temple. The open house would be happening soon. Indian food was the logical choice for the date because it was gluten-free, except for naan. And I served my mission there, so, you know. After dinner, we caught a movie at the Dollar Theater. During the movie, Easton and I held hands for the first time in several weeks. He would squeeze so hard at the tense parts that I almost wanted to retract my hand. But this was Easton. For him, I needed to endure. After the movie, I drove him home, walked him to the door, hugged him, and let him inside. I turned around and drove home. The next day was agony. I hyperanalyzed every aspect of my date with Easton. It had gone well, but he hadn't texted after. Maybe I would never hear from him again. This was all just a way of letting me off easy, like weaning an addict off a drug. Evening came. I did a grand total of 5 minutes of homework, nowhere near enough to keep me afloat in my classes. I had a hard time caring. Easton texted. Easton, you want to get together and talk a bit later on? Me, yeah, sounds good. Easton, cool, I'll pick you up. I was shaking as I waited for him to arrive. Thinking about him often made me tremble. The anxiety had a physical effect on my body. It caused me to feel sick and grow jittery. Easton, here, smiley face emoji. I went outside, climbed in the passenger side of Easton's car, and we drove off. He parked on the mountainside where we used to make out. I lit up with a glimmer of hope. Maybe he wouldn't reject me. I had a good time yesterday. He looked at me in the waning light of the day as we hung over Utah Valley. It reminded me of when we first started liking one another. I said nothing, fearful of messing up and causing Easton to change his mind. It's weird, like at the movie when we were holding hands, I just feel safe around you. And so, we agreed to pick up where we left off. We weren't dating, but we were in a better place than we had been. Easton dropped me back off at my apartment. We kissed for the first time since before Thanksgiving break. Bye, I said. I left him feeling lighter than I had felt in a long time. As I entered Heritage Hall's Building F, 2 bishopric members approached me. Bishop Stoll's counselors. They wore suits. Both were middle-aged, probably with a dozen kids between the both of them. They had solemn expressions as they approached me. One held an envelope. He proffered it to me wordlessly. I accepted it, numb. Once the envelope was in my hands, the counselors exited the building. I retired to a music room and scanned the letter, addressed to me and dated January 13th, 2016. It began, "The Bishopric of the Provo, Utah YSA 48th Ward is considering formal disciplinary action in your behalf. including the possibility of disfellowshipment or excommunication, because you are reported to have participated in conduct unbecoming a member of the church. The letter went on to invite me to attend the council, give my defense, and provide witnesses, as if anyone relevant cared. Finally, Bishop Stoll's signature closed the letter. I had received 40 hours of anticipation for my disciplinary council. The hours passed one another on a clock with broken gears. This moment had always been my destination. That crisis where my faith and desire met. I just didn't know it would be a car crash. The time was up. I was out of rope. There was no winning, and I was too exhausted to care. When you see inevitable destruction coming from afar, the only thing you can do is accept your fate. Maybe that's why I came out to my childhood friend, Mason, the night before my disciplinary council. I needed someone to confide in, if, in the worst-case scenario, I had to leave BYU. I knew myself. Keeping my expulsion a secret from all my friends would be tempting after such an outcome. Perhaps I would disappear from Provo without a word. But secrecy promised only one outcome, a slow descent into self-hatred so intense that suicide would be the only way out. I had already battled with suicidal thoughts once this week, and it was such a shitty feeling. If my life was about to fall apart, I needed to preempt this while I could still think rationally, which meant telling someone. I texted Mason, who still lived in Heritage Halls, despite hardly talking to me anymore. Me. Hey Mason, I know this is random, but do you think we could talk sometime tonight? Mason was awful at texting, like truly terrible. He replied a moment later, to my great surprise. Mason. Yeah, no problem. Does tonight work? Ariana and I are watching a show now. Ariana was Mason's girlfriend. They began dating when Claire and I did, but they were still together. Mason showed up at my apartment an hour later. He and I retired to my room. Wyatt was gone, so we were alone. What's this about? Mason asked once he and I were seated in my room. He seemed to have a perpetual amused expression stenciled on his face. I just want to talk, I said. I need to tell you a couple of things. Mason nodded, looking apprehensive. I guess, first off, I began, I wanted to let you know that I'm gay. Coming out with such little preamble felt almost reckless. Each time I said it, however, I had an easier time. Mason's mouth opened. Oh. His eyebrows scrunched up, as if digesting my words. How long have you known? I shrugged, rocking side to side. Since I was little, it's always been a thing. But Mason's face transformed into confusion. What about all the times we talked about girls in high school? Were you lying back then? A mixture of guilt and sorrow filled me. It was a fair enough question. I had talked about girls just as much as anyone, even objectifying them in a way that makes me cringe now. Maybe I was in denial? I was lying to myself and everyone else. Mason nodded, seeming to accept this explanation. Have you thought at all about the religious implications? Like, you know what the church says about that kind of thing. I nodded. I was all too aware. That sucks, man. Anyway, I'm in a bit of an awkward situation right now. My heart raced. I panicked at my own words. Me and a guy might have gone too far. I stopped, resolving myself. I shouldn't be afraid to say what was on my mind. Language should be clear, concise. No, we did. I went too far with a guy. If this information surprised Mason, he showed no sign. I plowed on. Tomorrow I have a disciplinary council with the bishopric. I don't know what will happen, but it's possible I won't be able to stay at BYU, depending on their decision. Mason stayed silent. Anyway, I guess I just wanted you to know. In case I'm not around. I said.